Harlem, New York, a heartbreaking case that shook the city has finally reached its conclusion. The brutal murder of 10-year-old Ayden Wolfe left an entire community in shock, demanding justice for the innocent boy whose life was cut tragically short. This week, Cato, the man responsible for Ayden's death, was found guilty of second-degree murder, closing a dark chapter in a case that exposed the horrors of child abuse in its most extreme form. The story of Ayden Wolfe is one of unimaginable suffering, but also of a city's determination to stand up for its most vulnerable. The gruesome details of his final moments reveal a reality that no child should ever endure. With Cato's conviction, justice has finally been served, but the scars left behind remain deep. Today we dive into the full story of Ayden Wolfe's tragic death and the trial that led to his killer's conviction. Before tragedy struck, Ayden Wolfe was just like any other 10-year-old boy, full of life, curiosity and dreams. He lived with his mother in Harlem, New York, and was known for his bright smile and kind personality. Teachers and neighbors described him as a gentle, well-mannered child who loved learning and making people laugh. Ayden had a deep love for superheroes, always imagining himself as one of them, fighting off villains and protecting those in need. But tragically, in the end, he was the one who needed saving. Behind the closed doors of his home, Ayden was subjected to unspeakable abuse, the extent of which would only come to light after his death. In early 2021, Ayden's life took a dark turn when Cato, his mother's boyfriend, moved into their home. Instead of providing protection and care, Cato turned into a monster in Ayden's life. Over time, signs of abuse began to surface, but no one could have imagined the horrifying brutality that would ultimately end Ayden's young life. His story would later spark outrage and heartbreak as people questioned how such a tragedy could have gone unnoticed until it was too late. On March 6, 2021, a 911 call was made from an apartment in Harlem, reporting an unresponsive child. When emergency responders arrived, they found 10-year-old Ayden Wolfe lying lifeless in the apartment's hallway. His small body was covered in bruises, scars and other injuries, clear signs of prolonged abuse. Medical examiners later determined that Ayden had suffered blunt force trauma to his head, chest and limbs. His ribs were broken, his organs severely damaged, and deep wounds covered his fragile frame. It was evident that this was not a single act of violence, but rather a sustained pattern of horrific abuse. Neighbors would later testify that they often heard loud banging, screaming and cries for help coming from the apartment. Some had even noticed Ayden's injuries, but his mother and her boyfriend, Cato, always dismissed concerns, claiming Ayden was just clumsy. However, on that fateful day, the abuse escalated beyond anything Ayden had endured before. Prosecutors revealed that Cato had beaten Ayden for hours, inflicting injuries so severe that his body could no longer withstand the pain. When paramedics arrived, Ayden showed no signs of life, and he was later pronounced dead at the hospital. His death sent shockwaves through the community, igniting outrage and sorrow. People demanded answers. How could this happen? Why wasn't Ayden saved in time? But the most pressing question was, would justice be served? His death sent shockwaves through the community, igniting outrage and sorrow. People demanded answers. How could this happen? Why wasn't Ayden saved in time? But the most pressing question was, would justice be served? The moment Ayden Wolfe was pronounced dead, authorities knew they were dealing with a case of extreme child abuse and homicide. The evidence was overwhelming. His body bore the marks of prolonged torture, and medical experts confirmed that the injuries were not accidental. Investigators quickly focused on Ryan Cato, Ayden's mother's boyfriend, who was in the apartment at the time of the emergency call. During questioning, Cato showed little remorse, initially claiming that Ayden had simply fallen or hurt himself while playing. But forensic evidence told a different story. The autopsy report painted a gruesome picture. Ayden had suffered more than 50 injuries, including fractured ribs, internal bleeding and deep bruising. The sheer brutality of the injuries suggested they were inflicted over an extended period, not in a single incident. Detectives also interviewed neighbours, who revealed disturbing details. Loud thuds, screaming, and Ayden crying for help had been heard in the days leading up to his death. Shockingly, no one intervened, assuming it was just another case of domestic discipline. With this damning evidence, police arrested Ryan Cato and charged him with second-degree murder. As he was taken into custody, a crowd had gathered outside the apartment building, shouting for justice. The community was enraged, heartbroken, and demanding answers. Now, with Cato behind bars, the next step was the trial. Would the justice system ensure Ayden's suffering was not in vain? The trial of Ryan Cato was one of the most heartbreaking and emotionally charged cases Harlem had seen in years. Prosecutors painted a chilling picture of Ayden Wolfe's final days, detailing the brutal abuse he suffered at the hands of Cato. During the trial, medical experts testified that Ayden's injuries were consistent with sustained physical torture. His ribs shattered, his internal organs severely damaged, and bruises covering nearly every part of his small body. The prosecution argued that this was not a momentary lapse in judgment, but rather a pattern of systematic cruelty that ended in the cold-blooded murder of a defenseless child. Perhaps the most gut-wrenching moment came when Ayden's mother took the stand. While she was not charged in the case, many questioned how she had allowed this to happen. In a tearful testimony, she claimed she was unaware of the extent of Cato's abuse, an excuse that did little to ease the public's outrage. The defense attempted to argue that Cato did not intend to kill Ayden, but the evidence was too damning. Surveillance footage from a nearby building showed Cato leaving and re-entering the apartment multiple times on the day of Ayden's death, ignoring the child's suffering instead of seeking medical help. After weeks of testimony, the jury returned their verdict, guilty of second-degree murder. Cato's sentencing is expected to bring a lengthy prison term, ensuring that he will never again harm another child. As the verdict was read, a wave of relief swept through the courtroom. For Ayden's family and the Harlem community, justice had finally been served, but the pain of losing Ayden would never truly fade. The news of Ryan Cato's guilty verdict was met with a mix of relief, grief and anger throughout the Harlem community. While many were thankful that justice had been served, there was also an overwhelming sense of heartbreak and frustration. Ayden Wolfe's life should have never ended this way. Vigils were held in Ayden's honor, with hundreds gathering to mourn the loss of an innocent child and demand better protections for children in abusive homes. People left candles, stuffed animals and handwritten notes outside the apartment building where Ayden spent his last days. Messages like "Fly high, Ayden, and we failed you, but we won't fail." Others filled the sidewalks. Activists and child welfare advocates used Ayden's case as a call to action, questioning how the system allowed such severe abuse to go unnoticed. Many asked, why were the warning signs ignored? Why wasn't Ayden rescued in time? Some even called for stricter laws and better intervention programs to ensure no other child suffers the same fate. Though Cato will now face the consequences of his actions, the community continues to mourn Ayden, a bright, loving child whose life was stolen far too soon. His memory now serves as a painful reminder that child abuse cannot be ignored. The conviction of Ryan Cato brings some measure of justice for 10-year-old Ayden Wolfe, but it does not erase the suffering he endured or the tragic fact that he never got the chance to grow up. His story is a painful reminder of the dangers of child abuse and the responsibility we all have to speak up when we see signs of harm. Ayden's death sparked outrage, heartbreak, and an urgent call for stronger protections for children in vulnerable situations. While his killer will spend years behind bars, the fight to prevent another tragedy like this is far from over. If this story touched you, if it made you think, or if you believe that no child should suffer in silence, subscribe to our channel for more true crime stories that shine a light on the pursuit of justice. Together, we can help give a voice to the voiceless. Let's honor Ayden's memory by making sure no other child suffers the way he did. Justice for Ayden.